feeling when you sit down to write an email? A simple email. And 2 hours later, you have 12 different drafts open and you still haven't sent anything? That was me last week. Every version, the second it landed on the screen, came with a label. Too stiff, too casual, not warm enough, too eager. And the more I labeled, the more paralyzed everything became.
What if the email wasn't the problem? What if the moment you decided some words were too formal, that judgment itself was the thing standing between you and sending? Not the words, the judging.
Good morning, dear friends. Welcome to the Road to Awakening. We're so glad you've made room for us in your day.
Good morning, everyone. Today we sit together with the second chapter of the Tao Te Ching. Let's begin by hearing the whole chapter together, just to receive it first, before we begin to explore.
When the world defined beauty, and to carry out the act to meet the definition, this action is already ugly. When we define good, and to carry out the act to meet the definition, this action is already not good. Thus, furnish and void co-create mutually. Difficult and easy co-establish mutually. Long and short mutually complement. Upper and lower mutually supporting. Music, frequency, and sound amplitude mutually harmonize. Front and rear mutually follow. Thereby, the saints manage matters with no act in deed. They operate teaching, not by words, but by action. All things being worked thereupon, and yet not being excused or dismissed. To create and yet take no possession. To act and yet hold no credit. Only those who act and not dwell on it, thereby will always be remembered indeed. Achieve merit and yet not dwell in it, not seeking recognition.
A few dozen lines. And yet, there is something here that can take a lifetime to actually touch.
Every time I read this chapter, a different sentence is the one that catches.
Let's begin at the very first line. When the world defined beauty and to carry out the act to meet the definition, this action is already ugly.
It almost sounds like a warning.
It is. And notice how pointed Lao Tzu is being. He is not only saying that the moment we label something beautiful, an opposite quietly arises in the mind, he is saying something even more specific. The moment the world settles on a definition of beauty, and people begin performing the act to meet that definition, the act of performing has already turned ugly. The definition and the chasing of it arrive in the same breath. The ugliness is not somewhere else, waiting to be discovered later. It is right inside the chase.
When I first sat with this line, my instinct was to argue. Surely we can love a sunset without doing any harm. What is wrong with appreciating things?
That is exactly the right question. And Lao Tzu's answer is subtle. He is not condemning appreciation. He is pointing at what happens once appreciation hardens into a standard the whole world reaches for. The Swiss psychologist Carl Jung observed something remarkably parallel in his clinical practice. He noticed that every one of us walks through life wearing what he called a persona, a public-facing self that has been carefully shaped to meet the standard of acceptable and good. And behind the persona, Jung found something else. He called it the shadow. The shadow holds everything we judged in ourselves as not beautiful enough, not good enough, not what a respectable person should be. We did not destroy those parts. We hid them, even from ourselves, into a corner of the psyche where we could no longer see them. And yet, they did not disappear. Jung saw, day after day, that the parts hidden in shadow come back in another shape, as harsh judgments of others, as inexplicable irritation, as the bitter sting we feel when someone is praised for the very thing we secretly long to be praised for.
So the more I perform beautiful or good on the outside, the heavier the shadow gets on the inside.
Precisely. The persona and the shadow are not two separate truths about you. They are two faces of the same act. The moment one face is built, the other is created in the same gesture. This is the structure Lao Tzu encoded in his opening line. The world defines beauty. People act to meet the definition. The act itself has already become ugly, because every act of conforming to a standard requires the simultaneous suppression of everything in us that does not fit.
I have noticed something in my own life. Sometimes I think I don't have much of a judging mind. And then I realize it is only because my judgments happen to point in the same direction as the people around me. So I never feel the friction. I think I'm not measuring, but really, I am just measuring with the same ruler everyone else is using.
That observation is deep, Amy. When your standard aligns with the room you are in, you cannot feel that the standard is there. It only becomes visible when you walk into a room with a different standard, or meet someone the standard quietly excludes. Then suddenly the ruler is in your hand, heavy. There is an old story from ancient China. A king happened to love tiny waists. He did not issue any law, he just let it be known what he found beautiful, and within a generation, women in the palace were starving themselves to be slender enough to win his approval. Some died. He never punished anyone for being a different shape. He did not have to. The standard, once spoken aloud by power, did all the harm. That story is precisely the situation Lao Tzu is describing. The harm is not in the king's taste. The harm is in the moment one person's preference becomes the measure for everyone, and people begin performing themselves into the shape of that measure.
It makes me think about the photos I post. Every photo I share, I'm half aware of the standard it is meeting, even when I think I am just posting a sunset.
The standard runs deeper than we like to admit. It runs through the clothes we pick in the morning, the way we describe our weekend at a Monday meeting, the way we tell the story of our life when someone asks how we are. The persona is doing constant, quiet work, and every act of polishing it sends another piece of us into the shadow. But notice, friends, Lao Tzu's line is not only diagnosis, it is also a doorway. He is showing us where the suffering starts so we can find where it can end. And to find where it can end, we have to ask a different kind of question. Who is the one who sees the standard? Who is the one in you who notices right now that you have been performing for a definition you did not choose? That seeing, that is not the persona. That is not the shadow. That is something else entirely. Something that was here before any standard was installed.
That seeing, what is it?
In the Chan tradition, a moment has been preserved for over 1,000 years that points at exactly this. The sixth patriarch, Hui Neng, had received the secret transmission of the Dharma and was fleeing for his life. A monk named Hui Ming caught up with him on a mountainside, intending to take the lineage robe back. When the monk finally drew near, Hui Neng laid the robe down on a rock and waited. The monk tried to lift it. He could not. Something in him broke open, and he asked instead for the teaching. Hui Neng turned and said, "Do not think of good. Do not think of evil. At precisely this moment, what is your original face before your father and mother were born?" The records say the monk was instantly awakened. Right there. Not from a long sermon, from one question that, for a single breath, suspended the entire machinery of good and evil. And what was left in that breath was not emptiness. It was the awareness that had been there all along, before any standard had ever been installed. Lao Tzu, in his own century and his own language, is pointing at exactly the same thing. He is not asking us to find a better ruler. He is asking us to notice that something is already here in us that has no ruler at all.
So the whole inner project of, I should love myself more, I should compare less, I should be more confident, that is also just another ruler?
Exactly. I should compare less. I should feel more confident. I should remember my own value. All of those are more rulers. They just point in a different direction. What Lao Tzu is pointing toward is something prior to all of them, the awareness underneath, the seeing that was already there before any standard got built. And that awareness is not a faraway holy thing. It is the very thing that right now is listening to these words. Let's move to the second line. When we define good, and to carry out the act to meet the definition, this action is already not good. Lao Tzu repeats this structure on purpose. He shifts from beauty to goodness because they wound differently. Beauty becomes a cage of appearance. Goodness becomes a hidden hierarchy that can dress itself in righteousness while it quietly presses other people down. That is what makes this line, in some ways, even more piercing than the first.
I know someone who is very intentional about being a good parent, reads all the books, follows all the modern parenting guidance, never raises her voice, and in conversation, you can feel how subtly she places everyone else's parenting on a ladder beneath her. She does not say it. She does not have to. The standard is doing the work. Her children, by the way, sense it perfectly. They feel measured every time their mother is around another mother.
That is the exact mechanism Lao Tzu is naming. Once good parent has hardened into a checklist, every act of caring for the children is silently scored against the checklist. The caring becomes a performance, and the moment the caring becomes a performance, it has lost the inner quality that made it actually good. Lao Tzu's wording is precise here. To carry out the act to meet the definition, once that is the inner motive, the act has already become not good. Not because the parent is wicked, but because the inner movement of the act has been hijacked by the standard.
It is the same shadow problem from before, just dressed in a different costume.
Exactly the same. There's a story I find quietly beautiful in the Confucian tradition. A young man asked his teacher whether a certain kind act counted as goodness. The teacher replied, "When your father helped the neighbors rebuild their fence last winter, did he first ask himself whether this would be credited to him as goodness?" The young man was quiet for a moment. "No," he said. "He just did it." The teacher said, "Then ask no more. That is goodness flowing from its source, not goodness performing itself." The Gospel of Matthew carries the same signal. Jesus, teaching his followers, said, "When you give to those in need, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing." The moment the left hand knows, the moment the giver becomes aware that this is a credit-worthy act, the giving has already become a performance for a standard, and the inner goodness has quietly slipped away. 3 different traditions, several different centuries, all pointing at the same hidden mechanism. The moment goodness is performed for the definition, the not good is already there.
Resting in the good. Not performing it.
Beautifully said. The Confucian Great Learning speaks of resting in the utmost good, not striving toward the picture of good, not enforcing the picture of good, but resting in something prior to the picture, prior to the comparison, prior to the definition. And here is the very practical part. The next time you catch yourself thinking, "I am being a good person right now," pause for one breath. Notice that there is a small administrator inside you, keeping score. Don't fight the administrator. Just see it. The seeing itself is the move Lao Tzu is pointing toward. And the seeing leads back to that prior, unlabeled awareness, the one who was here before any standard arrived.
Leo, when I sit with this, I notice I am a little afraid to keep looking, because I am not sure I want to find out how much of my life has been a performance.
That very hesitation right at the door is itself a precious signal. It means the shadow has come close. It means something honest has been seen, even if you have not named it yet. To even admit, perhaps some of this has been performance, is all ready to take the shadow from behind the back and bring it into the light. You do not have to fix anything today. The seeing is enough for today. The seeing is the entire move.
This is The Road to Awakening, a podcast about turning the inner light back on, one quiet noticing at a time. If anything in the conversation so far has caught somewhere inside you, a phrase, a small recognition, a moment of, that is happening in me right now, please consider following the show, leaving a comment, or sharing this episode with one person you think it might reach. We read every comment. You help shape what we look at next. We are walking a spiritual awakening path together, and this community grows one quiet listener at a time. Your presence is how it continues.
Thank you, Amy. And now, Lao Tzu does not leave us with only beauty and goodness. He shows us that this same pattern runs through the architecture of reality itself. He gives us 6 pairs in a row. Today, we will sit with the first 2 of them, furnish and void, and difficult and easy, and let the remaining 4 open out in the next episode.
Thus, furnish and void co-create mutually. Difficult and easy co-establish mutually.
Lao Tzu's word here, furnish, is unusual and worth pausing on. He is not just speaking of being and non-being as a philosophy seminar might. Furnish carries the sense of something filled, provided, set in place, and void is the empty that allows the furnishing to mean anything at all. They are not opposites locked in combat. They co-create. The one calls the other forth in the very same instant. Hold a cup in your hand. The furnish of the cup is everything material, the ceramic, the glaze, the curve of the rim. But the part of the cup that can actually hold tea is the void inside. Take away the void, and you do not have a cup. You have a solid block. The usefulness of the cup lives in what is not there. And yet the void cannot exist as a cup at all without the furnish surrounding it. They co-create. They are born together every time you call it a cup.
So the cup is the relationship between the two, not just the ceramic and not just the emptiness.
Yes, and once you see it in a cup, you start seeing it everywhere. A house is useful because of the rooms, the void inside the walls. The walls are the furnish. Take the void away, and the house is a solid brick. A page is readable because of the white space between the letters. A piece of music is musical because of the silence between the notes. The Taoist philosopher Tao Te Ching tells a story of a great mountain tree. Every carpenter who passes by ignores it, too gnarled, too twisted to build with. They call it useless. But the tree lives for thousands of years, and in its shade, entire villages find shelter. The tree's uselessness, its void as timber, is the very ground of its long life and the shelter it offers. Chuang Tzu's point is quietly precise. The useful and the useless do not live in separate kingdoms with a wall between them. They co-create. The moment you name one, the other is already there.
It makes me think about presence in relationships. The presence of a person is not only what they say or do, it is also their silences. The way they make room for you without filling the room with themselves.
A beautifully alive example. A friend who simply sits with you when you are grieving and does not try to fix it is doing both at once. They are present, and they are also leaving space. If they were only present, they would start advising. If they were only absent, they would be gone. The mystery of their being with you lives in the co-creating of both. Furnish and void, giving rise to each other, not in a philosophy book, but right there in your living room.
So when I sit on a cushion trying to, quote, empty my mind, I am actually trying to push the furnish away and force a void to appear.
Exactly. And that very pushing is itself a furnish, a doing, a project,
a striving. The void you imagine on the other side of all that effort will not arrive that way, because it cannot arrive that way. Real stillness is not the disappearance of thought. Real stillness is the recognition that the awareness within which thought arises has never been disturbed by thought in the first place. There is no void you have to manufacture. There is a void that has been here, behind the furnish of every thought, every emotion, every striving, quietly making room for all of it. You do not have to make it. You only have to notice it.
That reframes everything I thought meditation was supposed to be.
It does for most of us. And it lines up with a much older signal from the Book of Changes. One yin, one yang. That is the Tao. Yin and yang are not two warring forces. They are one motion seen from two sides. What allows them to dance, and is itself not disturbed by the dance, is the Tao. The furnish and void of Lao Tzu, the yin and yang of the Changes, the form and emptiness of the Heart Sutra. 3 doors, the same room. And the room is not somewhere out there. The room is the awareness that is, right now, hearing these words.
The second pair? Difficult and easy co-establish mutually.
This is often where the chapter starts to feel personal, because most of us can name something difficult in our lives right now. A project, a relationship, a decision we have been putting off for months. And the inner voice tends to whisper, "This should not be this hard. If I were better at this, it would be easier by now."
That voice lives rent-free in my mind.
In most minds. Lao Tzu's line does not promise that the difficult thing will become easy. It says something subtler and more freeing. Difficult and easy are not opposite kingdoms with a wall between them. They co-establish. They make each other visible. The very fact that a moment feels difficult means there is, somewhere in your sense of it, an imagined easy you are measuring against. Without the imagined easy, there would be no difficult. There would just be this, the thing in front of you, with its own particular weight and texture.
So the suffering is not only in the thing being hard, it is in comparing it to a version of itself that is supposed to be easier.
Yes, and that comparison is doing a great deal of damage. The Analects record a line, "First the difficulty, then the yield." Confucius was not saying that difficulty is merely a price you pay before the reward arrives. He was pointing at something more intimate. The effort and the yield are of one piece. The difficult is not a wall you push through to reach the easy side. They co-establish. Each one is part of how the other becomes real. But Lao Tzu is pointing at something even deeper than that practical reading. He is pointing at what is present in the very middle of the difficulty. When the project is hardest, when the relationship is most strained, when the decision feels heaviest. On the surface, the entire world seems to be collapsing onto you. And yet, if you are willing to turn your attention inward, even for a single breath, you will notice something extraordinary. In the very center of the difficult, there is something that knows it is difficult, but is not drowning in it. Something that sees the strain, something that feels the weight, but is itself, at the center, quiet, untouched, not anxious, not running away, just clearly, simply present.
I have felt that. Rarely, but I have felt it.
Most people have, at least once. The reason it is rare is not that it disappears. It is here, right now, with every one of us. The reason it is rare is that we are usually too busy fighting the difficulty to notice. For most of us, difficulty is a signal that we should push harder. Lao Tzu is suggesting something almost opposite. The difficulty is also an invitation to turn inward and find what is already, quietly, undrowning.
So difficulty is not only a problem to solve.
It can be a doorway. The easy times, the smooth weeks, the quiet seasons are often when we lose track of this inner awareness because nothing forces us to look. The difficult times are exactly when the inner light becomes possible to recognize. That is the deeper co-establishing. Without some difficulty in our lives, most of us would never turn around and find what was always present. The Austrian psychiatrist Viktor Frankl was sent with his family to the concentration camps during the Second World War. He lost his parents, his wife, his unborn child, his career, his freedom. Everything that can be taken from a human being was taken. When he came out, he wrote a sentence that I cannot read without going quiet. He said, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." To feel the weight of that sentence, you have to remember he was not writing from a study. He was writing it after living through the most concentrated difficulty a human being can be subjected to. And what he found inside that difficulty was not what he had expected. He found a space inside himself, beneath all the deprivation, that could not be reached by the camp. It could not be touched by hunger. It could not be taken by violence. It was a space of inner choice, a space of seeing. Frankl, working in a completely different vocabulary, from a completely different tradition, was pointing at exactly what Lao Tzu was pointing at. Difficult and easy co-establish, and at the very center of the difficult, there is something that is not difficult at all.
That space he found, is it the same as the seeing we kept circling earlier?
Beautifully observed. It is the same. The space that watches the standard arrive. The awareness that was here before the labels. The original face Huineng pointed to, the no ruler awareness Lao Tzu keeps trying to introduce to us. Frankl found it in a camp. Huineng pointed to it on a mountainside. Lao Tzu wrote about it in the opening lines of this chapter. The vocabulary differs. The pointing is the same.
And it is already in us.
Already in you. Closer than your breath, quieter than your thoughts. Never in a far country, never in a future life. Right here, in this very moment, when difficult and easy is being thought. Let's close here, dear friends. We have only opened the first 2 of Lao Tzu's 6 pairs, furnish and void, difficult and easy. The remaining 4, long and short, upper and lower, music and sound, front and rear, and the extraordinary lines about the saints who manage matters with no act, those we will sit with in the next episode. Today we have brushed against 2 seeings. The first, that every time the mind defines a beauty or a goodness and starts performing the act to meet the definition, the ugliness has already entered the act in the same instant. Standards are not innocent. The very mechanism of standardizing produces its shadow. The second, that opposites, far from being enemies, co-create and co-establish each other. And underneath their dance is something that does not dance. Something that holds the dance without being moved by it. Something that is, very quietly, already here in you. These are not facts to memorize. They are doorways to carry into the week. Into the next moment, a verdict arrives in you. Into the next moment, a difficulty feels heavier than it should. Into the next ordinary breath, when nothing seems to be happening at all. Here is the question I would like to leave with you this week. When you next feel a strong, "she is wonderful," or "he is terrible," or "this is so unfair," rising in you, that exact moment, from where in you is that feeling rising? I am not asking you to answer the question quickly. I am asking you to let it accompany you, gently, into the next moment a judgment moves in your chest. Pause, just before you follow the verdict. And in the pause, look, not at the verdict, but at what is watching the verdict arrive.
Don't name what you find. Don't try to hold on to it. Just see, for one breath, whether it is there.
I am going to carry that question carefully this week.
If today's conversation touched something in you, the most generous thing you can do is leave a small word in the comments, even one line, and share this episode with one person you think might be ready to hear it. Your kindness and sharing is how this practice travels.
Thank you, dear friends, for sitting with us today. If there is anything in this exploration that was framed unclearly or that did not serve you, please be patient with me, and may all the sages and enlightened ones gently correct what needs correcting. We will meet again in the next episode.
Gratitude for the grace of heaven and virtue of teachers. Thank you for listening. See you next time.